Hey, welcome to my channel. My name is Ruby and I make sewing patterns, and today we're going to be making my Abigail puff sleeve blouse design. This design is actually what got me my initial following. I posted a TikTok of it and it blew up, and then I quit my job so I could make and sell them full time. I think it's so cute. You can wear it off the shoulder too. Milkmaid, cottage core, coquette vibes, or whatever. There's a printed home pattern for this design at the first link down below. I'll go through all the steps with you in excruciating detail. Here's the list of all the materials that you'll need. Yeah, check out all my other patterns linked below as well. Like and subscribe, and let's just get into the tutorial. The print settings for this pattern should be scale 100% and double-sided off. You can use A4 or letter size paper to print. Just be sure to set the scale to 100%. This pattern is also compatible with Adobe Acrobat, and using Acrobat allows you to print only your desired size. To do this, you'll open the file in Acrobat and select the layers option, and then you'll deselect all sizes except for your own. If you're printing from Adobe Acrobat, I like to use the posters setting. Once you've printed the pattern, you'll cut out each piece of paper along the outside of their borders. Then you'll match up each piece one at a time according to the pattern layout in the info file. You'll tape each piece in place and then cut out the pattern pieces in your desired size. You should have a front, back, and sleeve piece. You'll need to identify the cut edge and your selvage edge. The cut edge is raw and the selvage is finished. You'll place your sleeve piece with its grain line parallel to the selvage and pin it through 2 layers of fabric. Then you'll cut it out using fabric scissors or a rotary cutter. Now snip every notch identified on the pattern piece. Notice that the back side armpit has a double notch, so you'll cut 2 notches here. The double notch will always indicate that you're working with the back side of a garment. The sleeves should mirror one another, so one has the back notches on the left side and the other on the right. They should have opposite right sides. Then you'll cut out your front and back pieces. These need to be cut on a fold, so the 2 arrows face the fold line of the fabric. Then snip all your notches and make sure you get those 2 center front and center back notches at the top and bottom of each piece. For the back piece, remember to snip 2 notches so you know that it's the back. Excuse Mr. Milo for the coming clips. He gets what he wants. You need to pre-serge or zigzag stitch the side seams. This is done so the edges don't fray and the pieces don't fall apart. So do this along the side seams of every piece. Now you'll take your sleeve pieces, and with the wrong sides facing up, you'll press the top and bottom up a 1/2 inch using your iron, like this, for both sleeve pieces. You'll do the same for your front and back pieces, but the top will be pressed a 1/2 inch and the bottom will be pressed a full inch up. Now take your front piece with the right side facing up and unfold the bottom. Then take your back piece and place them right sides together and pin them along the side seam. Use a regular straight stitch to sew them together here using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Unfold the pieces and press that seam open using your iron. You plan on using lace. Now you'll need to line that lace along the bottom and cut it to be the exact length of both of those pieces put together. Now take that strip of lace, fold it in half, and at the ends, sew it together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Then cut that seam allowance off. Now we're going to take our front and back pieces again, with right sides facing, sew them together at their other side seam, and being sure to unfold that folded up inch. And again, pressing that seam open using your iron. Fold the piece right side out and fold up that 1/2 inch. Take your circle of lace and place its seam at one of the bodice piece's side seams. The lace should be placed upside down and the raw edge of your seam should be facing outward. Now pin or clip the lace all around the hem of the bodice like this, with the edges lining up perfectly. Now you'll sew the lace to the hem along the edge using about an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now you'll fold the lace over the edge and sew it in place here, all the way around using a 1/16 of an inch seam allowance. Take your elastic of choice and pre-stretch it out. You need to yank on it so it's at its fullest freaking stretchiest potential. For the size of your underbust elastic, I did 10 inches smaller than my underbust. Now, it depends on how strong your elastic is. So whatever feels comfortable, just remember that the elastic is going to stretch when you sew it down. So overdo it. Make it tighter than you think you need, much tighter. You'll take that piece of elastic and fold it in half, marking the center point. Then you'll fold the edges to the center and mark the quarter marks. Now taking our bodice piece, we're going to use that folded up inch of seam allowance and pin the elastic with one edge starting at the side seam, then the next mark at the center front notch, and then the next mark at the other side seam, and then the next mark at the center back notch, and then the end meets the other end. Make sure the elastic is like flat, facing the same direction all the way around, you know what I mean? At every spot that you pinned or clipped the elastic, you're gonna do a few stitches back and forth, just basting it in place, replacing what the pin was doing. Now we're going to sew the elastic to the edge all the way around by stretching the elastic to be the length of the fabric. So placing it starting at the side seam, then stretching by grabbing where the next notch is. You'll stretch the elastic and zigzag stitch it along the edge. The smaller your zigzag stitches, the less your elastic will stretch. So I'd recommend your zigzag stitch width be at least 4 millimeters and your length at least 3 millimeters. Fold that inch hem allowance so the lace is sticking out the bottom, you know what I mean, like the right way, like that. You'll place it like this under your presser foot and then zigzag stitch the elastic to the fabric. Oh my god, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time explaining. But you're gonna pull the elastic there like I'm doing there and just zigzag stitch it in place all the way around like this. And I just want to show you the difference here. I used a zigzag stitch that's too small here, so it doesn't stretch enough, as opposed to this other one where I used a bigger zigzag stitch, so it like really scrunches up and it'll, you know, help your boobs not fall out of your shirt. Now moving on to your sleeves. If you want to do lace trim on your sleeves, you'll do the same thing, just measuring it and cutting it to be the exact length. Now I think lace looks better when it's shorter on the sleeve than it is on the bodice, so I just stitched an inch away from the bottom, like all the way across the top, and then I cut all of that excess off. This is just to make it a little bit shorter, so I don't know if you'll want to do this, but that's what I did. Regardless if you want it shorter or not, you're gonna do the same thing we did before, folding it in half, sewing it using a 1/2 inch seam allowance right there, and cutting off the excess. Now with the right side facing up on the sleeve, you'll unfold that bottom that we pressed, pin it at the side seams, and sew it there using a 1/2 inch. Then press open that seam using your iron. Turn the sleeve right side out, folding up that hem inwards, and take your lace, placing the, you know, ugly side of the seam at the seam that we just made. So the ugly side of the seam is up and you're pinning it all around the sleeve. I'm really losing it, guys. Now stitch it along the edge using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then fold that lace over itself and stitch it down using a 1/16 inch seam allowance. Now we're going to measure some elastic to be the size of your arm, but smaller, much smaller, because it's gonna stretch when you sew it down. Remember, oh my god, just make it smaller than your arm size, okay? And cut 2 identical sized ones. So measure your arm once and then, you know, cut the same length. So you have 2. Take that little piece of elastic, fold it in half, and mark the center point. Fold your sleeve wrong side out and pin one end of the elastic to the inside of that 1/2 inch folded up on the side seam, and then pin the center mark on the center notch on the opposite side of the sleeve, and then the other end will come around and pin, you know, flush against the first end. Then we will replace all of those pins or clips by stitching the elastic into the fabric, going back and forth on the small spot over and over again. We're going to do the same thing that we just did for the bodice piece by stretching the elastic so it's the length of the fabric. Starting at that side seam, we're going to stitch it just to that 1/2 inch folded up seam allowance. So make sure you're not stitching it on the lace. You'll pull it while you sew and zigzag stitch all the way around. Now fold it so the elastic goes upwards and the lace goes down. I hope that makes sense, but you know, just do what you see here and folding it inside out. Place the piece again, starting at the side seam. You're gonna stitch down the elastic by pulling the fabric and the elastic while you sew all the way around using a zigzag stitch. You'll repeat all those steps for your other sleeve, so you have 2, and then we're gonna take our bodice piece, fold it wrong side out, and then figure out which sleeve corresponds with which armhole, because remember, we did like opposites. So that one has 2 notches, so it's not that one, and that one has 1 notch, so it's that one. The sleeve is like right side out, so that the right sides are facing each other. You'll pin the sleeve to the armhole all the way around and stitch them together using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Then you're going to finish that raw edge by zigzag stitching all around the armpit. Then you repeat all those steps with your other sleeve and your other armhole. We're going to measure some more elastic here. I think what's best is to actually just use your bust size. Mine's 34 and that's what I cut it to, so you can do what I'm doing here or you can just cut it to your bust size. We're doing the same thing here again, folding it in half and marking the center point, then folding the ends to meet the center and marking those quarter marks. You're going to take one end of the elastic and place it at the center back, at the top there on the inside of that folded up seam allowance. Then the following mark will be at the center of that next sleeve. The next mark is at the center front mark. The following is at the other center of that sleeve, and the other end meets the end. And then we stitch those in place, replacing where the pins are. Same thing over again. Once each spot is basted in place, we're going to do what we've done before by starting where the ends are. We're going to zigzag stitch the elastic to the fabric. Remember that that little seam allowance where I just put that clip needs to face the sleeve. So when you get to that point, like I'm about to here, I'm making sure that that seam allowance faces towards me because that's where the sleeve is. Also, you should always be pulling that elastic from where the next basted point is. So never just pull the elastic from a random spot. You have to pull it from where your notch and elastic are sewn together. Again, I'm coming up on that seam allowance and it's folded towards the sleeve, so it's folded away from me. Now that the elastic is sewn down, you're going to use that pressed line from when we pressed the pieces at the original whatever, and you're going to fold it so that that line is folded and then zigzag stitch the elastic in place. I'm doing it with the right side up. You can just do it with the wrong side up. I don't know why I did it like that. Again, you're pulling the fabric and the elastic so that they're the same length while you sew. Once you come out from this stitch, you are finally finished, and I linked below a little tutorial on how to make ribbon into a bow. And I like to stitch that to the center front of the tops that I make. So you're done. Thanks so much for watching. I hope that this went well for you. All my other patterns are linked down below as well. I think that the Bella boxer shorts look very cute with this top, so you can make a little matching set. Like and subscribe. Okay, bye.